Now, when you chose this seminar, you might have gone into it with a couple of expectations and certainly a couple of questions, and one of these questions might have been, why the F should we talk about age and aging, and why the hell should we talk about that in literature studies? And while there are a couple of answers to this question, one might follow the lines of Chris Gillett and Paul Higgs, who state that age is perhaps one of the truly inevitable realities that we eventually will all and must all face, and to which we often also aspire to. Moreover, it is, together with race or ethnicity and gender, one of the first features we obviously notice about others, and thus it guides our social interactions with others by seemingly answer questions about how to talk, how to address people, as well as assumptions about competence, knowledge, and experience, for instance. And another answer would be, and it is certainly one that has gained much more momentum and traction in public and political debates, it would be the reference to the increasing demographic change and the challenges that this societal change obviously brings with. Similarly to most Western societies, Great Britain, Germany, the US, their age structures are significantly altered due to declining fertility rates and rising life expectancy. While the number of people aged 65 or older made up about 11% of the population in 1950, this number rose to around 19% by 2019 and is expected to rise further and increase to about 25% in 2055. Not only are the numbers of those reaching older age increasing, moreover, those that do reach older age are getting actually even older, often reaching ages around 90 or higher. As for instance, the Office of National Statistics notes, while the growth rate of those reaching 90 and older has slowed generally, the total number of those people aged over 90 years has increased by 0.7% in 2018 in comparison to 1.5 and 2.7% in the preceding years. This demographic change has obviously raised a couple of economic, financial, as well as social concerns, which range from financing state pensions to the steady pushing back of pension ages, as well as to questions of care, informal care, formal care, and so on and so forth. All of these questions, all of these concerns have also fed the narrative of an already rolling silver tsunami, a looming wave of a large and sick and demanding old population that might eventually overwhelm welfare systems of most Western societies, resulting in a financial and political burden that will be carried by younger generations. What is notable about portrayals of age and aging within the framework of these debates is that both the stage of life as well as the process are framed as narrow and very binary. That does not mean, of course, that more positive outlooks on older age do not exist. After all, the Office for National Statistics proclaims that longer lives are not necessarily a disadvantage, but rather a stage that brings about a wealth of options to choose from. For instance, by providing people with the option to continue to contribute for longer through longer working lives, volunteering, and possibly providing care for family members. Yet the idea that age is a phase of constant deterioration is still very much prevalent. Age is therefore more often than not tied in with some form of mental or physical decline, being perceived as a biological degradation process marked by a set of slowly worsening health problems, marginalization from employment and productivity, and dependency upon the state. In recent years, the connection between age, illness, and dependency has exacerbated not only the fear of aging, but has moreover served as a form of dependency anxiety in an aging public, which is organized around individual independence throughout the life. Aging seemingly means to have less, to gain less, and in some cases with exacerbated deterioration, to be less. And indeed, some of you might have imagined something like this. While some of you might have not imagined something like this, but rather something that goes like this. When you heard age. But while you know both ideas, the question you should ask is, why is there no in-between, and why do our images of age usually fall into either a decline narrative in which older adults are frail and dependent, or into the trap of believing in the autonomous, fit, silver surfer older adult? I'm quite sure that in your personal life, you know both, don't get me wrong. But while I'm explaining both views and their implications, and why the predominance of both absolutely complicates our understandings of later life, I need to state that both are very much stereotypical portrayals. And what we and you need to keep in mind is that you always hold stereotype incongruent information. That is, you know older adults personally, of course, your grandparents, sometimes even your parents. And thus your brain is constantly trying to juggle and balance and evaluate those stereotypes that I've just named and your own experiences, which will be absolutely important later, especially when we talk about sort of the representations of later life. But now, on with the biomedical perspectives on aging. Such decline discourses rely and emphasize biomedical understandings of older age. And with that reliance on biomedical discourses of aging, the aging body has become a linchpin of public, political, and social debates on aging. Whereas visual markers of age, such as graying hair or wrinkles, have long been part and parcel of the aging process, the biomedicalization of older age has led to viewing the body as an expression of purely natural processes, a view that pathologizes age in a way that age becomes not only recognizable by a set of typical symptoms, but also one that renders age a totalizing and homogenized experience that roughly progresses the same way for all people. This narrowing down on the body is, as Julia Twigg has noted, not a recent development, but has occurred in the wake of modern science-based medicine during the 19th century. Yet aging presented a crisis of thought in modern medicine, as its biological characteristics disrupted a neat distinction which clinical mapping was endeavoring to establish between health and disease. Biological aging thus became both normal and pathological. And modern medicine converted the realities and problems of aging into a set of universal dilemmas, rendering aging not only largely homogenized, but also rendering age very much problematic. Subsequently, the biomedicalization of older age ran parallel to and eventually replaced discourses of the past in which the last stages of life were valued and significant by virtue of their nearness to death, and in which there were still possibilities of narratives of development, whereas the aged body in the past was not isolated and meaningless but linked to a larger system of thought. Medical and biological perspectives on older age did not allow for such complex readings of the aging body and aging itself. With greater emphasis put on the aging body and on classifiable symptoms of old age, older bodies became faulty and unbound and hard to control, and yet because they were seen as medical problems, their pitfalls could be elevated by medical intervention, a development that had and still has consequences for other discourses on aging, as well as the treatment of older people in society. This increasingly negative view on the aging body highlighted some forms of biological deterioration to a degree that, as Stanley Hall exemplifies, aging bodies were linked to empty shipwrecks. Bodies who are battered, waterlogged, leaky derelicts without cargo or crew, charred rudder, sail or engine, remaining afloat only because they have struck no fatal rocks or because the storms have not yet swamped them. The narrowing down on the body, as well as the cultural dominance of decline narratives, have on the one hand helped to amass empirical data to assess and distribute resources to older adults, but have on the other hand encouraged society to think about aging as pathological or abnormal, as a set of medical problems that can affect older people. Thus, in this discourse, aging bodies became largely passive bodies, the victims of their own decline as well as a problem and a burden. Moreover, this trend in which the aging body and its visible markers of age is seen as a problem that needs to be solved, avoided, or at least hidden, has not only become popular and influential in the representation of later life and in the social imaginary of older age, but it has also fortified the notion that aging is a negative, irreversible process of stagnation, decline, or regression. A notion that gerontological research has helped to foster by consistently reporting and emphasizing decline, whether it is physical, psychological, social, or decline in the capabilities and capacities of older adults. Now, the problem is that in an aging society, with its prospect of living longer and receiving better healthcare and being even older and being increasingly affluent, the need to gain and circulate a more complex and a more positive understanding of the aging process arose both from older generations that declined to decline, as well as from the consumer industry that sought to explore the gold in grey, as seniors who were previously depicted as sexless, senile, crotchety, frail and unhappy were now seen as a major new market segment. As a result, older adults were able to actively determine how to be old, what to wear, what to own, where to live, and how to look, and so on and so forth. It is, as Gillard and Higgs have noted, due to the experiences of post-World War II mass affluence, the development of age-defined subcultures, and the establishment of a distinctive generational consciousness that separated itself from the mentality of earlier generations, that a new outlook on older age first emerged as a cultural field. A cultural field which was carried forward and supported by the lifestyles of particular birth cohorts and an expanding range of lifestyle choices and sources of social distinction that resist and by resisting undermine the structuring identity of old age. Due to an increasing number of people who are defying aging stereotypes, society's attitudes towards old age and aging appear to be changing. Most notably, the generation of these so-called baby boomers has been cited as the birth cohort who, due to these factors, may have had, to an extent, a share in shaping and reconfiguring the way that age has been perceived medically, culturally, and socially, and politically. Whereas the biomedical perspectives hold scarcely any positive connotations about older age. These different realities saw a rise to a new stage of life referred to as the third age, a term made salient by Peter Leslet. The third age is used to describe life after the responsibilities of paid employment and child rearing are over, and is defined as an age of personal achievement and fulfillment. An age that puts vigorous emphasis on the potential for and indeed the likelihood of a healthy and engaged older age. And it is generally connoted with terms such as activity, productivity, autonomy, and so on and so forth, all terms which are usually connected to youth and midlife. It is often treated as a new stage of life that lies right between middle age and old age, but it is in a way a hybrid of both. It is, as Gillard and Higgs note, the crown of life, a success of both society and the individual, equally distanced from the responsibilities of adulthood, but also the infirmities of old age. While it was first introduced into social gerontology, this renegotiation or renegation of a part of the aging process that sought to fill age with positive notions subsequently evolved discursively and found its way into policymaking and consumerist culture. As such, aging wasn't seen as a final pathway to decline any longer that would eventually result in social marginalization and dependency upon the state and state pensions, but rather the third age hinges on and revolves around the idea of, or the possibility and the imperative to age successfully. Successful aging, with its strong ties to consumerism, or seemed to turn older age into a matter of lifestyle choices, shifting narratives from sickness and decline to health, liberation, and refurbishment. Older people were not, as Andrew Blakey noted, expected to don the retirement uniform any longer, but they were they were encouraged not only to dress young and look youthful, but also to exercise, to have sex, take holidays, socialize in ways indistinguishable from those of their children's generation. As such, later life and old age is not something that just happens to you, but it is something that third agers are asked to actively engage in, whether by participating in consumer culture or by actively countering the effects of the aging process. A plethora of magazines, self-help books, television programs, and other works of popular culture encourage the not longer young to not let themselves become the old. Adult life was meant to be read neither as old or young, but as a series of passages. In this vein, the aspect of bodily aging became another arena for self-care and for lifestyle fashioning. The body itself was rendered a project to be worked on, a legitimate site for all manners of rejuvenating discourses and cosmetic practices. Not only that, this malleability of the old body seemed to imply the promise that, as far as aging and aging identities were concerned, that one might somehow choose not to become old. After all, for a price, older adults could avail themselves of pharmacological interventions like steroids, Viagra, and hormone replacement therapies, merge bodies and machines to prolong life, surgically make the body look younger or restore erections, replace hips and other joints, allow postmenopausal women to give birth, and avail of the miracles of genetic engineering. Thus, the third age rejects discourses of old age as decline, a rejection that defines a critical boundary for the third age, which is achieved less by people masking or misrepresenting their chronological age, but by denying its structural power, refusing to learn to be old. While the age as a decline narrative positions older people and the older or the aging body as the other to youth and middle age, successful aging narratives seem to sidestep such ageist and narrow understandings, holding the most promise to those who want to preserve middle-aged vitality or who wish to avoid being seemingly old or frail or withdrawn. And yet the discourse of successful or positive aging needs to be taken with a grain of salt, or, well, a huge chunk of salt actually. Anyhow, needs to be taken with a grain of salt, and its liberation effects should not be overstated. One of the central problems of the discourses of successful or positive aging is that they do not ultimately challenge either the age hierarchy that persists in society, nor do they challenge the ageism that goes along with it. Instead, the third age has produced simply other grand narratives, which also impose totalizing ideals about the meaning of good old age. Youth and youthfulness are retained as ideals that are desirable, as successful and positive aging are generally connoted with terms like activity, productivity, and autonomy. All in all, neoliberal imperatives of capitalist subjectivity, which are also strongly associated with youth and midlife and the productive phases of the life course. The older body, moreover, is still a problem. It is still seen as a problem, as declining bodies are disruptive bodies that contravene cultural norms, in particular the trend towards greater bodily control, that is, the control of function. Yet it is a problem which can be made better by drug therapy, exercise, fitness, and health regimes, or that may be hidden by an active concealment of the signs of later life and old age through clothing, anti-aging products, makeup, or bearing, as well as by surgical correction of body parts. As such, successful aging requires not only maintenance of the activities popular amongst middle ages privileged with money and leisure time, but to retain the highly valued cultural capital and physical capital that is staying fit, or at least to be appearing fit to outsiders. By encouraging senior citizens to engage in various technologies of the self in order to control and discipline unruly older bodies, successful aging may be regarded as successful non-aging or agelessness. As Tony Calasanti and Neil King very succinctly put, successful aging means not aging and not being old because our constructions of old age contain no positive content. Indeed, the appeal of the third age and its ideals of successful aging may lie precisely in this apparent distance to older age, fortifying the view that old age will not begin until 80. Thus, the aim of discourses of successful aging is less painting an inclusive and positive image of older age, rather it proposes that people simply become older but not old. Another criticism that can be leveled at successful aging discourses is that it opens up yet another binary, namely those that age successfully and those that will not, cannot, or do not age successfully. As advertisements, films, and other media show old people playing golf or tennis or traveling, sipping wine in front of sunsets, and strolling or jogging on the beaches of upscale resorts, they also assume activities, practices, and lifestyles that are only available to a very select group of often men whose race and class make them most likely to be able to afford it. The focus on productivity and consumerism leaves those that are chronically ill, disabled, or those who prefer not to be active as a problem for society due to their complacency about being old. Subsequently, active aging seemingly suggests that old age only befalls those too powerless, too poor, too stupid to do something about it. By making this distinction of young old, of old, successful aging disregards the groups of people marked by difference in ethnicity, in sexuality, in class, and those whose access to the third age is impeded by the structural inequities that intersect with the very ageism that the third age discourse was originally developed to elevate or to mitigate. As such, this discourse, which highlights the idea of choice in later life, is not only limited to those that can afford it, but furthermore, it presents this form of aging less as an option, but more as an political, social, and moral obligation. Only if people age successfully and thus stay healthy and independent for a longer period of time can the strain of the aging looming silver tsunami on welfare systems be allayed. As a result, older people, as well as their bodies, have become subjected to an increasing policing and disciplining, dividing older people into those who are considered to be a problem and those who remain active and therefore are not considered to be old. Thus, certain values are assigned to these groups. Those who are less active are old, and thus less valuable, while those who remain active and productive are valued more highly. This means that the positive aging discourses, or that the successful aging discourse, eclipses the specificities of the aging body and the material processes of aging, as well as considerations of illness, decline, marginalization, or even death. Instead, it shifts the blame for aging unsuccessfully to either the aged themselves or to their bodies, as signs of aging are seen as bodily betrayals, signs of actual frailty, dependency, or as a loss of self-control. Now, the realities of aging are usually neither nor and both. While some discourses and scholars have noted that the aging body should be taken out of the equation altogether, after all, we are only as old as we feel, aren't we? To counter biomedical discourses in this case, others have sought to formulate age a little different, incorporating both biomedical views and a more socially constructed approach to aging. Hence, while the transition to older age is culturally negotiated, the body plays a direct and immediate part. At an individual level, people come to recognize their own aging through changes of bodily appearance, and these changes are either reflected, embodied, or assisted in the choices they make, whether it be lifestyle choices or social engagement. Yet Yet older people are also described very much from the outside, descriptions by which the individual comes to feel he or she is old by the means of others. In this vein, it seems vertible to echo the claim that one is not born old, one becomes old. By paraphrasing Simone de Beauvoir's commonly cited phrase, one is not born a woman, one becomes one, it is also possible to think of age as something that is constructed by social and cultural practices that individuals engage and practice in. As such, we do age as much as we do, for instance, gender. Being old is thus something that becomes understandable and meaningful through culture and discourse. Old age does not merely refer to chronological age, but is something that depends on cultural intelligibility, signs on the body that we interpret as old, being eligible for a pension, having experienced parts of the life course from childhood to adolescence, and middle age are all parts of being accepted and being read as old. Yet, no matter the variations that exist in describing someone as old or as not old, and no matter the inner realities of aging that differ from individual to individual, the aging of the body occurs regardless of how it is culturally signified. Therefore, bodies shape the experiences of aging in particular ways, depending on the lived and experienced body realities and changes that this process sort of brings with. By tying both threads, namely the importance of corporeality, as well as the construction of age and aging by cultural processes together, Margaret Gillette's statement, aged by culture, can be extended by an additional remark, namely that humans might be aged by culture in the sense that people are called into older age and described from outside and subsequently perform or do age in various ways, but people are just as much driven by biology, which forms the material basis, so to speak, for the performance of aged selves. From this in-between, between the binaries of decline discourses and successful aging, as well as between the cultural and biological processes, more diverse narratives of age can emerge if age and aging are understood as both biological processes and lived realities that are culturally signified, negotiated and performed.